Okay, so we're now on page 6 of the Livy Book 3 text, and it starts with this phrase here, pavida puella stupenta. Now this is an ablative absolute, right? So you've got with the girl, puella, and she is described as pavida, which means something like fearful, trembling, something like that. And then the verb is stupente, that's our ablative participle. So stupeo, stupere, means to be stupefied, to be shocked, to be horrified. So literally, with the trembling girl being stupefied. Or in my translation, I put while the trembling girl was stupefied. And then the subject of this, in this sentence, is concursus. Now, literally, a concursus is a running together. Con meaning together and cursus meaning running. And then the main verb is fit, F-I-T, which means becomes or happens. So literally a running together happens. Or you could say a crowd gathers, something like that. So a crowd gathers ad clamorem, towards the shout, of the nurse, nutricis. Nutricis is the genitive of nutrix, meaning a nurse. So the crowd gathers towards the shout of her nurse, Virginia's nurse. This will be I suppose, a female slave who had looked after her from when she was born. And then the nurse is described by this participle, implorantis, which means something like, well, we get the English word implore from it, sort of calling upon or appealing to, right? So the shout of the nurse appealing to, and the object is fidem, literally the faith of the quirites. Quiritium is genitive plural. Okay, so faith here, maybe faithfulness, something like that. In other words, the nurse is appealing to the common decency or the sense of community of the people. She's appealing to them and hoping that they will see this injustice being done and want to help to stop it. This word is a rather odd one, quiritium. Now, this noun quirites is a technical term. It means Roman citizens. And it's named after Quirinus, who was a kind of early god associated with ancient Rome. Okay, so that's the first sentence. In the next sentence, the subject is populare nomen. So populare is the adjective and nomen is the noun. So the popular name of her father Virginius, so Vergini Patris, Patris is genitive case, the popular name of her father, sponsique Icili, that means and of her fiancé Isilius, right? So sponsus literally means having been promised. So it is a promised man, a man promised to her, in other words, a fiancé. And then agreeing with sponsi in the genitive case is the name Icili of Isilius, okay? And the name of the dad and the name of the fiancé was being celebrabatur, was being literally celebrated or proclaimed, shouted about. And populare, what this probably has a double meaning. One meaning is the names are well known. Right? Everyone hears, oh, this is the daughter of Virginius, who we all know. Or, oh, this is the fiancé of Isilius, who we all know. The other meaning of populare is that these people, Virginius and Isilius, are plebeian. They belong to the masses, the poor people. They're not from the noble families, and therefore they are more beloved by the rest of the common people. So that's the idea there. And then in the next sentence, the subject is gratia. And gratia in this case means something like regard or respect. Okay, so respect for them, literally respect of them, eorum, genitive plural, but in English we would say respect for them. And the main verb is conciliat, like reconciliation in English. So respect for them unites, and the object is notos, that means known people, right? Acquaintances, people who are friends, maybe, of this family. So respect for them unites acquaintances to the maiden. Virginie is dative singular, to the maiden. And there's no word for and in the Latin, but we can add it. And the indignitas, the shamefulness of the matter, rei, genitive plural, genitive singular, the shamefulness of the matter, conciliat turbam, so we use conciliat twice here, unites the crowd, the turbam, to the maiden. So we can use Virginie twice as well. So the point is, people who know the family are on Virginia's side because they respect the family, but even other people who've never met them, right, the turba, the crowd, even they are on Virginia's side because they can see that this is a shameful action being done by Marcus, the client. So, okay, let's go on then. So, jam. Now, jam means by now or already. Okay, so by now, she was, erat, safe, tuta, from violence, RV. She was safe from violence. Why was she safe from violence? Because there's a big crowd now supporting her. So, at this point, Marcus can't just drag her off by force because the crowd would start a rebellion or something. So by now she was already safe from violence. When, the adsertor, the claimant, right, the person making the claim that she's a slave, this word, by the way, can be spelled assertor, which is where we get the word assert or assertion from in English, right? So when the claimant, and then the main verb is ait at the end, the claimant says, and of course we now go into indirect statement, so we're expecting an infinitive. The claimant says, that there is, esse, there's our infinitive, he says that there is, nihil opus, no need, right? Opus means a work or an action, but in the phrase opus esse, that means to be a need, that there is a need for something, right? Like opus est pecunia, there is need for money. And it takes ablative, right? The thing that there is need of goes into the ablative case. So he says that there is, esse, no need, nihil opus, and here is our ablative, there is no need for a multitudine concitata, for an excited multitude, crowd. So the claimant is saying, don't worry, nothing to see here, you don't all need to gather round, just go back to your homes, kind of thing. And then we remain in indirect speech, so we're still having accusatives and infinitives. So he says, we can imagine ait again, he says that he, say, reflexive pronoun, he says that he, and then here's another infinitive, he says that he is proceeding or acting, grassari, by law, ablative of use, jure, he's proceeding by law, non vi, not by force. Okay, so he says to people, don't worry, I'm acting perfectly legally, I'm not just dragging this girl off somewhere. And then in the next sentence, vocat puellam, he calls the girl, or he summons the girl, in use, literally into law. Although in English, you don't summon someone into law, you summon them to court. So in my translation, I've put to court as a translation of in use. Okay, last sentence on that page. We have okay, this is kind of another ablative absolute, but we're missing a verb. So the ablative noun is auctoribus, and the word auctor has lots of different meanings, like author, creator, etc. In this situation, it would mean something like supporter. Okay, so with the supporters, qui aderant, who were present. And then here, okay, I'm just going to put in an arrow here. Okay, here we should have some kind of verb, but Livy's just assuming the verb. So we can imagine something like monentibus, right? With the supporters who were present, advising ut sequeretur, that she follow. So we're now going into an indirect command, advising that she should follow, ut plus subjunctive. Okay. They went, Latin here uses perventum est. This is what we would call an impersonal verb. So literally it means something like, there is a coming, there is a movement. Although in English we don't really do that. So in English we might say they went. So just say like ierunt or something. Ad tribunal Appi, to the tribunal of Appius. So Appius is genitive case. And a tribunal, by the way, means in Latin, it means a raised platform on which judges would sit. And that's where we get the English word tribunal from. So they came to Appius's tribunal. So basically, Virginia's friends who are around her are saying, you'd probably better go to the law court. Otherwise, it might look like you have something to hide. So better to just turn up and trust that justice will be done. Though, of course, it's not that simple, as we'll find out. Okay, so if we then go down to the next page, so this is now page 8. So the subject in this first sentence is petitor, which literally means a seeker, someone looking for something. And in a legal context, we would translate that as the plaintiff. So the plaintiff, and the main verb is per agit, literally goes through, or you could say tells. The plaintiff goes through the fabulam, the story, and fabula particularly suggests a made-up story, an invented story, which it is. So the plaintiff goes through the story, and the story is described as notam judici, known to the judge. So judici is dative, singular of judex. So the plaintiff goes through the story known to the judge. And now we find out why the story is known to the judge. Normally the case would be brand new for the judge, but this is not new because quippe. And now again we have to add in a verb here. Or actually we could take per agit again, right? Because he is telling the story in front of apud, the author himself, ipsum auctorem, of the argument or of the plot, argumenti, genitive singular. So the reason the judge knows the story already is because he was the one who invented the story in the first place. Okay, so going on then, we now switch into indirect statements again. So we're expecting accusatives and infinitives. Okay, so Marcus says that, well, what does he say? He says, so the first accusative is puella, right? So he says that the girl, and then we have to take here, natam esse, had been born, or you could say having been born, just natam, having been born at his house, domi suai. That's a locative form, having been born at his house. And, que, having been transported, translatam, having been transported by stealth, furto, right? Furtum means sort of, stealth or thievery, something like that. So having been transported secretly from there, in there, into the house of Virginius, in domum Virginii, right? She had been suppositam, which means sort of, suppositam a means something like imposed upon him, right? Given to him, but with the sense that she doesn't belong with him. That's why I put given falsely to him. So in other words, she is given to him and he thinks this is his daughter, but it actually is not. Because the whole point of this plot is to claim that Virginius is actually not the father of Virginia. Okay. And then in the next part of the sentence, we're still in indirect statement. So he said that he, say, there's our relative pronoun, he said that he, sorry, not relative pronoun, reflexive pronoun. He said that he, and here's our infinitive, ad ferre, he said that he was bringing forth, and the object is id, right, that thing or that charge, right, all the stuff we've just heard. He said that he was bringing forth that charge. Compertum indicio, learnt, that's a PPP, compertum, learnt from evidence, indicio. That's where we get that's the ablative case of indicium, and that's where we get the word indicate or indication from in English. So he said that he was bringing forth this thing, this charge, having been learned from evidence. And, we're still in indirect statement, and he said that he, right, we're still using say as the subject, he said that he would prove it. Again, id would be the object. He said that he would prove it. So this is probare, to prove, and this is the future participle. He said that he would prove it, even ipso Virginio judice, even with Virginius himself as judge. So that's a sort of ablative absolute, even with Virginius himself being judge. And there's no verb there. Okay, so even with Virginius himself as judge, ad quem, to whom, quem is referring to Virginius, to whom the maior pars, the greater part, injuriae eos, of that injustice, pertineat, pertained or applied. Right. So Marcus is saying, look, even if Virginius himself was the judge, even he would admit that this girl, this evidence shows that the girl is not his daughter, but actually my slave. Why is it that the greater part of the injustice applies to Virginius? So he's saying, I'm not trying to harm Virginius in some way. He actually is worse affected by the trickery, than I am, because he has been living with this girl thinking she was his daughter and she wasn't. Right, so he's saying it's not as if Virginius is having a great time and I'm trying to mess everything up for him. It's actually the case that Virginius has been ill-treated and I'm trying to fix things for Virginius. So he's trying to sow in people's minds the idea that actually Virginius wouldn't object to what he's doing. He's doing Virginius a favor. Okay, now last clause for this video, interim, right? So he said that meanwhile, it was right, aecum esse, right? We're still in indirect statement, so there's our infinitive. Meanwhile, he said that it was right, aecum esse, that the slave girl, ancillam, or it was right for the slave girl to follow, sequi, infinitive of sequor, her master, dominum. So this is the big question, right? There will be a trial to decide whether Virginia is actually a slave or actually a free woman. And Marcus is saying that until the trial happens, we should assume that Virginia is a slave. Right? So we should assume that she's a slave and she should go with Marcus until the trial actually decides it. And as we'll see, the other group are going to say, no, we should assume that she's free until the trial. So that's going to be the next issue that comes up.